The young man walked into the small cafe like he always did, quiet and unnoticed. He wasn't the type people paid attention to. His clothes were simple, his hair a little messy from the wind, and he moved with a softness that made him blend into any crowd. He ordered the same thing every time, a cup of tea, and sat near the window where he could watch people passing by. But that wasn't the real reason he came here so often. On the far side of the cafe, near a brick wall decorated with tiny lights, stood an old wooden piano. It wasn't fancy. The paint was chipped at the corners, a few keys were slightly faded, and the bench wobbled if you sat down too fast. Most customers ignored it. Some thought it was just a decoration, a piece meant to make the cafe look artistic. Almost no one touched it. But for him, it was the only thing in the entire place that mattered. Every time he sat in his usual spot, his eyes kept drifting toward the piano. It reminded him of the nights he spent practicing alone in his small room at home. He had taught himself to play by listening to songs again and again, rewinding them until he could match the melody. He had never taken lessons. His family couldn't afford that, but music was the one thing that made him feel alive. So he practiced anyway, using an old keyboard someone had given away for free. He never told anyone about his passion. He feared they would laugh, or worse, pretend to listen and then forget. In this world, people rarely believed that someone quiet could have something special hidden inside. But today, something felt different. He watched the piano as if it were calling to him. Maybe it was the way the late afternoon sunlight touched the keys. Maybe it was the soft music playing through the speakers that made his chest feel warm. Or maybe it was simply time for him to stop hiding his dream. He took a slow breath, feeling his heart pound in his chest. He didn't know if he had the courage to ask. What if they said no? What if people laughed? What if he made a mistake and embarrassed himself? But another thought pushed him forward. What if he didn't try? What if he stayed afraid forever? When his cup was half empty, he finally stood up. His legs felt heavier than usual, but he walked toward the counter. A few customers glanced at him but quickly went back to their conversations. He reached the counter and cleared his throat gently. "Excuse me," he said softly to the worker behind the register. Is it okay if I play the piano for a few minutes?" The cafe worker, who was wiping a tray, looked up in surprise. He didn't expect the quiet young man to ask something like that. The worker stared at him for a moment before letting out a short laugh. "You want to play that thing?" he asked, pointing to the piano. "It's mostly just for show." The young man nodded shyly. "I know, but I can play a little, if it's okay." Before the worker could answer, a group of customers sitting nearby overheard the conversation. One of them chuckled loudly. "He thinks he can play." The man joked to his friends, "Bro, that piano is older than his haircut." The people at the table laughed. Another joked, "Maybe he wants to practice Twinkle Twinkle Little Star." The young man heard every word. His ears burned, and for a moment he regretted ever asking. He looked down, wishing he could disappear. The worker behind the counter shrugged. I guess if you really want to, go ahead, just don't break it." More laughter erupted from the group. The young man nodded softly. "Thank you." He walked toward the piano slowly, trying to ignore the whispers and giggles around him. A woman near the door nudged her friend and pointed. "Look, he's actually going to play," she whispered. "This should be interesting." Someone else lifted their phone, ready to record. They weren't expecting music, they were expecting something funny. Something to share online for a quick laugh. He reached the piano and touched the wooden surface gently. It felt rough, but familiar. The keys looked worn, but he pressed one down carefully. It made a soft sound, slightly off tune but not terrible. He tried another key, then another, testing the feel. His hands trembled slightly. He could feel people staring at him. The air felt heavier, filled with expectation but not the good kind. It was the kind that waits for someone to fail. He sat on the wobbling bench and closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered all the nights he practiced alone, all the times he played until his fingers felt numb, all the melodies he worked on even when no one believed he would ever have a chance to play for others. He opened his eyes and placed both hands on the keys. The cafe went quiet for a second as people leaned in. Waiting to laugh, he pressed the first note. It was soft, gentle, almost shy, like a whisper. But then he played another note, then another, building a small melody. His fingers moved slowly at first, unsure, but after a few seconds, they warmed up. His hands remembered everything he had practiced for years. The melody began to grow. It wasn't a random tune. It wasn't basic or childish. It was smooth, emotional, full of life, something that came straight from his heart. The simple cafe around him seemed to fade away as the music spread. Through the air, the laughter stopped. People exchanged confused glances. The man who mocked him earlier lowered his hand and stopped recording. The woman at the door tilted her head, trying to understand what she was hearing. Even the worker behind the counter stood frozen. The young man continued playing, letting the music guide him. His body relaxed. His hands danced across the keys with a confidence he didn't realize he had. Each note flowed into the next, creating a song that felt warm and comforting. The kind that makes people pause without knowing why. A couple near the window stopped talking and leaned in. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered, "He plays good." The mother nodded softly. Unable to look away from the young man's hands, the cafe became so quiet you could hear the soft click of keys beneath his fingers. His eyes stayed focused on the piano. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't thinking about the people who laughed earlier. He was simply letting his heart speak through the music. It was the only way he ever knew how to express himself. The customers who mocked him earlier felt their smiles fade. They looked at each other awkwardly, realizing how wrong they had judged him. Their laughter felt heavier now, almost embarrassing. The melody grew stronger, deeper. His fingers moved with speed and precision, playing a piece he had spent years perfecting. Some people held their breath, afraid to make a sound that might interrupt the magic of the moment. Even the worker behind the counter leaned forward, whispering, "I didn't expect that." The owner of the cafe stepped out from the back, confused by the sudden silence. He expected to see customers arguing or complaining. Instead, he saw everyone staring toward the corner of the cafe. When he followed their gaze, he froze. There, sitting on the old piano bench, was the quiet young man, playing with a skill and emotion that didn't match his shy appearance at all. The owner stood completely still, listening as the notes filled the room with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. The young man played as if the cafe wasn't filled with people who doubted him, as if the world outside didn't exist, as if the music was a bridge connecting him to something bigger than the small life he lived each day. When he reached the most emotional part of the song, his fingers pressed harder, pouring every hidden feeling into the keys. Some customers felt a lump in their throat. Others closed their eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over them. No one laughed now. No one recorded. No one recorded. No one spoke. Everyone simply listened. Finally, after several minutes, he played the last soft note. It lingered in the air, sweet and tender, and then nothing. Silence. The entire cafe froze, stunned. People stared at him with wide eyes, unable to believe the transformation they had witnessed. He slowly lifted his hands from the keys and took a shaky breath. He didn't look up yet. He had no idea what the reactions would be. He thought maybe they would still laugh. Maybe they would still see him as nothing special. But for the first time since entering the cafe, everyone saw him differently. The boy they mocked for even asking to play had just left the entire cafe speechless. The cafe stayed busy that evening, but something about the atmosphere felt different after the young man finished playing. People were still talking about him, even long after he had moved away from the piano. Some were whispering softly, others speaking openly about how wrong they had been to judge him based on his appearance. A few customers even said they wished they had recorded the moment because it didn't feel real. It was like something from a movie, unexpected, emotional, and unforgettable. The young man sat quietly at his small table, sipping water the staff had brought him. He didn't order anything else. He wasn't looking around to admire the attention or enjoy the shocked faces. Instead, he looked calm, almost shy, as if he had simply done something ordinary, not something that had stunned an entire cafe. The manager, who had been embarrassed earlier by refusing his request, kept glancing at him from behind the counter. The more she replayed the moment in her mind, the more guilty she felt. She remembered the way she had tried to send him away politely but firmly. She remembered the laugh from the barista, the smirk from the two customers near the door, and the uncomfortable silence that followed. Now, all of it made her stomach twist. She realized what she had done. She had judged someone too quickly. Finally, the manager walked over to him. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Are you sure you don't want anything to eat?" she asked softly. "It's on the house." He smiled gently. "Thank you, but I'm all right. I wasn't trying to get anything for free. I just wanted a chance to play." This simple sentence hit her harder than she expected. He wasn't looking for a reward. He wasn't trying to show off. He simply wanted a moment with the piano, something he clearly loved deeply. A couple sitting nearby leaned toward him. "That was unbelievable," the woman said. "You should be performing somewhere, not just asking to play in cafe corners." He nodded politely but didn't say much. It was clear he wasn't used to so much attention, and even though he appreciated their kindness, he wasn't trying to turn the moment into anything bigger. He didn't hand out a card. He didn't talk about social media or dreams of fame. He didn't say a word about his background. He just sat quietly, like someone who had lived a long time with music as his only friend. Not long after, a man wearing a neat coat walked up to him. He had been sitting near the window, watching the whole scene from the moment the young man first approached the piano. "Excuse me," the man said, "but I run a small performing arts school. If you're ever interested, I'd love to talk to you about opportunities. Talent like yours shouldn't be hidden." The young man thanked him kindly but didn't commit to anything. He said he appreciated the offer but that he played piano simply because he loved it. That response surprised the man, who expected someone with that level of skill to jump at the chance of being noticed or trained professionally. After the school owner returned to his seat, the young man gathered his small backpack. He stood up, ready to leave, even though almost everyone seemed disappointed that he was walking out so soon before he could reach the door. The same barista who had laughed at him earlier stopped him. The barista looked nervous, almost embarrassed. "Hey, I'm sorry," he said awkwardly. "I shouldn't have treated you like that. I didn't know. I mean, no one knew." The young man nodded. "It's all right," he said gently. "People make quick judgments. I'm used to it." That sentence made the barista look away, ashamed. It showed that this wasn't the first time the young man had been judged because of his clothes or the way he walked into a place. It hinted at a past full of misunderstanding, maybe even hardship, but he didn't blame anyone. He didn't hold anger. He just accepted life as it came. Just before he stepped outside, the manager called out one more time. "Please come back any time," she said. "You don't need to ask to play the piano. You're welcome here." He gave her a small smile, warm, grateful, and genuine. Then he left quietly, but the story didn't end there. The next day people started sharing what they had witnessed, even though no one had recorded it. Customers described the moment to friends and family as if it was something too beautiful to forget. Some said the cafe felt transformed while he played. Others said they had never seen such grace and emotion in a stranger before. By the afternoon, the cafe had more customers than usual. Some came just to see the piano where the unexpected moment had happened. They wanted to hear more, to know more, to experience something similar again. The manager realized that one simple act, letting a quiet young man play for a few minutes, had changed the energy of her cafe completely. One evening, just 3 days later, the door opened and the young man walked in again. This time, no one laughed. No one doubted him. Customers turned to look at him with hope, not judgment. The manager quickly approached him with a bright, welcoming smile. "I was hoping you'd come back," she said. He nodded politely. "If it's okay, I'd like to play again." Instead of answering with words, the manager simply stepped aside and gestured toward the piano. The reaction from the crowd was soft but full of excitement. People straightened in their seats, ready to witness another moment of calm magic. He sat down and placed his fingers gently on the keys. Before starting, he looked around the room and noticed a few people watching him with admiration. This time, he didn't seem shy. He seemed comfortable, almost happy, like he felt he belonged. He started playing a melody that was soothing and warm, something that made people pause their conversations and simply listen. The cafe seemed to breathe with him, every note floating softly in the air. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music take over. Others watched him like they were witnessing something rare, a gift that didn't need words or explanations. When he finished, the cafe filled with applause. This time, he didn't look surprised. Instead, he looked grateful, maybe even a little emotional. For the first time, he felt accepted by people who didn't know him at all. They didn't know his story. They didn't know what he had been through, but they respected his talent, and that meant everything. The manager walked over to him with a soft smile. "You've changed this place," she told him. "You've changed us." He looked down for a moment, touched by her words. "I didn't mean to change anything," he said quietly. "I just wanted to play, and that was the truth." His intention had never been to prove anything to anyone. He wasn't trying to impress a crowd or to silence critics. He simply followed the pull in his heart, the desire to touch the piano keys and let the music speak for him. But sometimes people don't realize how powerful their simple actions can be. Sometimes, what they do naturally becomes something memorable for others. And that's exactly what happened in that small cafe. A young man with a quiet soul and extraordinary talent turned an ordinary space into a place filled with emotion and hope. Over time, he became a familiar face at the cafe. Not every day, not even every week, but whenever he came in, people welcomed him warmly. Some customers even changed their attitudes toward others. They became more patient, less judgmental, kinder in small ways. His presence had softened something inside them. The cafe slowly became known as a place where a mysterious, talented young pianist sometimes played. People would ask the staff, "Is he coming today?" Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But everyone respected his privacy. No one tried to film him without permission. No one pushed him for details about his life. They simply enjoyed the moment when he sat down to play, and he appreciated that more than anyone. Knew his life didn't suddenly become glamorous. He didn't become famous overnight, but he found something just as valuable, a place where he felt seen, not judged. A place where his music mattered. A place where people listened with open hearts. In the end, it wasn't about shocking a cafe or proving anyone wrong. It was about the quiet power of talent, humility, and kindness. A power strong enough to change a room full of strangers, one melody at a time.